Hi everyone, my name is Aaron and welcome back to my channel. I want to make this video an open letter to the Clearwater City Council. The last video I uploaded was about a City Council work session that occurred last week where Mark Bunker was basically asking the council members to agree to request a racketeering investigation into the Church of Scientology locally. The responses from a couple of the council members left me with the impression that it seems perhaps they don't actually understand why the Church of Scientology does not want non-Scientologists in downtown Clearwater. The two council members specifically that certainly did not seem to understand this were David Albritton and Kathleen Beckman, but I wanted to make this an open letter to the whole council because perhaps I can provide an explanation with a level of detail that the mayor and Hoyt Hamilton maybe have not heard before. And hopefully if everybody truly understands why this is true, then maybe the council can stop acting like it thinks the Church of Scientology will ever be a constructive partner in the revitalization of downtown Clearwater, because this is how Scientology tricks the city leaders. They count on the fact that the city leaders don't understand their true motivations. They count on the fact that the city leaders will take them at face value. And if they do take them at face value because they don't understand their true motivations, then that allows Scientology to insert itself into a process that they have a vested interest in stopping. They want you to believe that they want the same things that you want so that you will allow them to participate in the process that they secretly want to stop. And this isn't just something that disgruntled former Scientologists say, it's actually true. So I'm going to do my best to explain it as quickly as possible. I think one reason it may be hard to believe that the Church of Scientology really doesn't want non-Scientologists in Clearwater is because we always hear of how hard Scientology works to recruit people and to bring in new members and to bring in hire new staff members and hire new Sea Org members. And that doesn't really match up with this idea that the largest Church of Scientology in the world doesn't want non-Scientologists around it. So maybe this can be a source of confusion. And this is why the answer requires a little bit of an explanation of the different levels of organizations, because it is true that Scientology wants everyone in the world to get into Scientology. I mean, they want everyone to join. Well, then why am I saying that they don't want non-Scientologists in Clearwater? The answer is that people are only supposed to get into Scientology at the lower level organizations. And the reason for this has to do with security. When you hear people talking about Scientology, you'll always hear them talking about different kinds of levels. Levels this, grades that. You've got levels of auditing. You've got levels of auditor training. You've got the OT levels. You've got different levels of organizations, and it can get very confusing. The problem with trying to explain just one part of these levels is that the levels of auditing and the levels of auditor training and the levels of organizations all tie into each other. I assume everyone on the council already understands that Scientology is organized around this thing that they call the Bridge to Total Freedom. And this thing is displayed in like a giant poster type thing that hangs on pretty much every wall in any Church of Scientology. And on the right side of this poster, that is the Bridge to Total Freedom, on the right side of the bridge, you have the various levels of auditing. And auditing is like just Scientology's brand of one-on-one counseling. That's the simplest way to think about it. On the left-hand side of this bridge, this poster, you have the different levels of auditor training. It actually takes a lot of time and a lot of training in Scientology to be a professional auditor. So the levels on the right side of this bridge match up with the levels on the left side, except the right side is auditing and the left side is training. Then you have the different levels of organizations in Scientology. Now, here in Clearwater, we have what is called the Flag Service Organization, which is located on the Flag Land Base. And all of this is just called Flag. There's actually like 6 or 7 different Scientology organizations that exist on the Flag Land Base. But it's like MacDill Air Force Base, where you might have a lot of different operating units from different branches of the military operating on MacDill Air Force Base, but you're still just going to call it MacDill. In order to understand why Flag is so important, it requires just some little understanding of the different levels of auditing, because Flag is the highest level organization in Scientology in the world, aside from the ship. But in this conversation, the ship doesn't matter. When you hear people talk about Scientology and you hear people talk about auditing, you'll hear about these things called the OT levels. Well, the OT levels are like the top half of the auditing portion of the bridge. And those are unbelievably confidential within Scientology. Only higher level organizations staffed by Sea Org members can deliver the OT levels. Lower level organizations where they want people to get into Scientology are not staffed by Sea Org members, and they do not have anything to do with the OT levels. There's nothing confidential happening at a lower level Scientology organization. There's an awful lot of confidential things happening in the upper level Scientology organizations that are staffed by Sea Org members. And when it comes to those Sea Org organizations that deliver the OT levels, Flag is the biggest one, and it is the only Church of Scientology in the world that delivers OT 7. I mentioned before that technically the only organization considered higher than Flag is the ship. That's because the ship is the only place where you can do OT 8. But the reason why I said the ship is a little bit irrelevant is because, one, it's at sea, so they don't have to worry about whether they want non-Scientologists around or not. And also, OT 8 only takes like a week or two, whereas OT 7, which can only be done at Flag, can take anywhere from 2 to 10 years. So in the world of Scientology, OT 8 might be the highest level of auditing that's available, but OT 7 is really more considered to be the most important level of auditing that is available. Flag is supposed to be the most highly secure delivery organization that exists in Scientology. By delivery organization, I mean a place where a Scientology paying public can go, give money, and receive auditing. There are more, of course, more secure bases in Scientology, but those are the management bases that exist in California, and public aren't allowed to go there. A public going there isn't going there to get auditing. Those are management organizations strictly. Flag is the biggest, largest, most important, and most highly secure Scientology service organization that exists in the world. You cannot get into Scientology at Flag. You cannot walk in off of the sidewalks of Clearwater into a Scientology building, sign up for a course or auditing, and receive it. Anyone who did walk into a Scientology building in Flag would be very politely stopped as quickly as possible. If the security personnel who stopped the person determined that they did have a genuine interest in getting into Scientology, they would walk them over to the Clearwater Bank building, have them watch a whole bunch of those little videos, and if they wanted to start a course, they would get in a little shuttle and they would drive them to either Bel Air or Ybor or Tampa to start Scientology at a lower level organization where you're supposed to start Scientology. To really drive this home, even most Scientologists aren't allowed to come to Flag. Any Scientologist anywhere in the world has to have written prior authorization from security here at Flag before getting on a plane and coming here to Clearwater to go on the base. Let's say a public said they wanted to come to Flag, so they started going through the security approval process at their local organization, and then maybe there was some delay and it wasn't fully authorized yet, and they got on a plane and they came and they showed up to the FH. They would be like, why are you here? You are not approved to be here. And if the public said, oh, that's fine, I'll just hang out in the hotel for a couple days until everything is all approved, they'd be like, no, you do not have approval to be here. Go find some motel to stay at on Gulf to Bay or down at the beach, and we'll let you know. And the fact that this person would have showed up without approval is now a strike against them. They're now going to have to get some extra work over and by the ethics officer to see, are you up to something? Are you working for someone? Most Scientologists are not allowed to come to Flag. I'm really pushing on this point because I want you to get that if that's how they feel about their own members, that even someone who's already been a member of the organization for a long time is not assumed to be safe, is not assumed to not be a plant, is not assumed to be someone that will not create trouble for the organization, then just imagine what they feel about non-Scientologists. And it really has nothing to do with whether they just think non-Scientologists are inherently bad. That's not the point, actually. It's that on the spectrum of something that poses a risk to the Flag land base and something that poses no risk to the Flag land base, even a Scientologist is considered to be somewhere on this spectrum unless they're fully vetted by Flag security. A non-Scientologist is just automatically somewhere on the riskier end of that spectrum. Chances are a non-Scientologist has heard the Xenu story. They've heard about the body thetans. They've seen the South Park episode. They've seen Going Clear. They've seen Leah Remini's Scientology in the Aftermath. Pretty much all non-Scientologists these days have a negative perception of Scientology. Scientology's PR is just awful. And David Miscavige's crown jewel in the Scientology world is the flag service organization. He wants to be able to work on this base without having to worry about security breaches. He wants Scientologists to be able to go about their business on this base without people walking by the Fort Harrison screaming, "Xenu!" or "David Miscavige beats his staff." He wants this city, or I should say he wants the downtown area, completely under his control. And not necessarily because it accomplishes some dream of having Clearwater being a Scientology city. I mean, even Miscavige knows that's not realistic. He's not going after the whole city of Clearwater. He's going after the downtown areas where all Scientology's buildings are, where the OT levels are delivered, where Miscavige has his offices. He wants this area completely under his control. Some of this information might seem to conflict with some stories that we hear of people going down to concerts at Coachman Park and they're being handed out flyers and they're being asked to come in for tours of those offices on North Fort Harrison Ave. But that does not conflict with what I'm saying. The reason these two things don't contradict is because you have to look at what kind of flyers are being handed out. Those flyers aren't promoting mainline Scientology. Those flyers are promoting these social betterment front groups that Scientology has created to try to give Scientology a good name in various sectors of society. It's only partially true that those sectors exist to sort of bring people into Scientology. That's not actually completely true. Those sectors exist to give Scientology a good name in society. Those, the Narconon, the Criminon, the United for Human Rights, the volunteer ministers, they're really there to do things that the church can then promote to say, look, we help people other than just Scientologists. And the unfortunate Sea Org members who are posted in those front group organizations have weekly statistics that they're responsible for, which include things like number of promo pieces handed out. And so anytime there's some large gathering at Coachman Park, yeah, someone's going to be down there handing out flyers. But don't let that confuse you that it means they're trying to recruit. That is not what it means to recruit someone into Scientology. Recruiting someone into Scientology looks like giving someone a ticket to come in and see a film about Dianetics, giving someone a personality test and having them come in and fill it out so you can then evaluate their test and tell them how terribly depressed they are and then offer them a Scientology course to fix it. Handing someone a booklet about human rights is not trying to recruit someone into Scientology. So these two concepts do not conflict with each other. So I already explained the importance of the flag land base and the importance of security at the flag land base. The reason Miscavige wanted to buy that property behind the Fort Harrison isn't because he needed a swimming pool. I mean, does that even make sense to anybody? He wants to buy that property because it's very important to him that some big giant developer doesn't come and build some big property right next to the Fort Harrison. It's almost certainly anything built on that lot would almost certainly be taller than the Fort Harrison, taller than the superpower building across the street from the Fort Harrison. And Miscavige considers it a breach of security at the flag land base to have a big giant building right next to the FH, taller than the FH, looking down on it. Miscavige is never going to be honest with you about that. Did it not seem a little weird that Miscavige would promise to spend what looked like millions or tens of millions of dollars improving the rest of the downtown area of Clearwater if you would just let him buy this $4 million piece of land? I mean, I know everybody must have noticed how disproportionate Miscavige's response to not being allowed to buy that property was in relation to why he said he wanted it. I mean, literally, I think he said he wanted to put a swimming pool there. And then he doesn't get the land. And he essentially starts a war with the city of Clearwater over it, initiates a boycott, goes on the offensive, attacks David Yates, the CEO of the aquarium, tries to get him fired, and then spends the next 2 years secretly buying 100 properties so that, and I realize maybe you think this is just conjecture, so that he can use it as a bargaining chip to either punish the city of Clearwater or to force the city of Clearwater's hand to give them or to allow him to finally buy that lot behind the Fort Harrison. And whether this whole little operation really fits the legal definition of racketeering is not really up for us to decide. That really should be up for the state attorney's office to decide or the FBI to decide. But this is why we're talking about this. Doesn't it seem weird that Scientology has never offered up an explanation for why they bought the old SunTrust Bank building? It's the largest commercial office building in downtown Clearwater. What in the hell does Scientology need with a commercial office building? They don't need it. They don't actually want it, other than they want to be able to make sure there are no businesses in that building that are owned or staffed by people who are openly hostile and antagonistic to Scientology, because such people are considered a security risk, even at lower level organizations. At Flag, they're just complete deal breakers. And I'm sure you have heard the stories of businesses in that building that are not owned by Scientologists having their leases non-renewed. The reason it occurred to me that maybe this information, as I'm explaining it here, was not understood is because both David Albritton and Kathleen Beckman said something to the effect of, we really do need open communication with the church because it hasn't worked so far. Not talking to them hasn't worked, so why keep trying the same thing? And the other statement about that was, everyone's got conjectures and guesses for why Miscavige is doing what he's doing, but nobody really knows. I agree the city should be in communication with Scientology. I agree the city manager should be in communication with David Miscavige. The United States of America don't trust the Russians, but we still speak with them. The US president still meets with Vladimir Putin, but we don't count on those meetings to be the source of our intelligence about what Russia is really doing. We rely on other sources of information to actually know what is going on in Russia or what Russia is doing and why they're doing it. We don't then go, I sure hope Putin explains it to us in the next meeting. To David Albritton specifically, David had mentioned this idea that the city leaders were highly criticized or attacked for having accepted meetings with Miscavige. Nobody was attacked for accepting a meeting or having a meeting. If there was criticism or attacks, which there were, they weren't for just having the meeting. They were for showing up and not having a spine and not holding his feet to the fire and not asking questions that mattered and not being transparent with the media about it. There was a real aura of secrecy around those meetings, and that's no one's fault than the people who went to the meeting and failed to be as open about them as you would be about any other meeting. I can tell you that as a citizen of Clearwater and as someone who understands what Scientology is doing in this city, I would expect a city leader to show up to a meeting with David Miscavige after having been completely cut off for 2 years and being like, listen, all due respect, you seem to want to have a relationship with us, or there's something that you want from us, and we want to have a relationship with you, and there's things that we want from you. But this behavior that you're doing is not conducive to a relationship. This behavior does not paint you well in our eyes. You need to act like an ally if you want to be treated like an ally. And specifically to Kathleen, Kathleen is the one who said, not talking to them hasn't worked so far, so I kind of think that we should talk to him. Yes, you should talk to him, but let's use the intelligence analogy. There are absolutely ways to find out why Miscavige is doing what he's doing, why the Flagland base behaves the way that it does, without talking to Miscavige. If we're going to use the intelligence analogy, you need other sources of information about the person you're trying to understand than the person himself. Well, luckily for the Clearwater City Council, there are probably a dozen people I could give you who have spent decades working at the Flagland base, have spent decades as very senior managers of the Flagland base, have spent decades working with David Miscavige. The fact that specifically David and Kathleen, to the best of my knowledge, and believe me, I would know, have not reached out to the people who could help them get these questions answered is what allows an awful lot of people to think, God, you've got to be in Scientology's pocket. And God, when I hear that, it really makes me mad. I know no one on the city council is in Scientology's pocket, but the vast majority of people out there who do understand Scientology don't understand why the Clearwater City Council behaves as it does. I want to address one more statement that was made, and this was a statement that was repeated by both, again, David Albritton and Kathleen Beckman. While referring to Scientology and the reluctance on a large part of the citizens of Clearwater to come to the downtown sector, David Albritton said people are scared of what they don't know. Kathleen reiterated that sentiment, and she said people fear what they don't know and what they don't understand. Here's what I want to address there. The people of Clearwater hate Scientology for what they've done to this town. They're not afraid of them. They distrust Scientology. They find all the uniformed staff members to be creepy and all of the sterile buildings to be uninviting and unfriendly. They don't want to spend money at a business that's owned by someone who's going to take that money and hand it over to the Church of Scientology. They don't want to fund an organization that they see as being at war and at odds and counter purposes with the city of Clearwater. That's not fear. So on the one hand, both of you are saying people fear what they don't understand. But then in the next breath, you admit you know nothing about Scientology and you're not afraid of them. If you take a quick step back and you look at that statement and you look at what you were talking about at the time, you were talking about people not wanting to come to downtown Clearwater. And you said people fear what they don't understand. It really sounds like you're saying if the people of Clearwater just understood Scientology better, they would want to come back downtown and there wouldn't be a problem. And when people who know better, which seems to be most people who are paying attention, hear you guys talk like that, they go, how can these guys be so naive? How can these guys be so ignorant and uninformed about what Scientology is organizationally, not as a belief system, organizationally, what their purposes are in Clearwater, what their priorities are in Clearwater? How can these guys not understand that the Church of Scientology and David Miscavige are not entities that are just going to be honest with you about their intentions? Just look at how they came here in the first place. And I guess I would ask you to look at it this way. Does Miscavige act like someone who thinks he is an ally of the city? Does Miscavige conduct himself in a way that makes you think he sees you as an ally? He doesn't. He doesn't give a damn about the city. He doesn't give a damn about you. He doesn't give a damn about the people of Clearwater. It really is concerning that one council member has said he's grown up here his entire life and seems completely uninformed about what this organization is. It's also concerning that one of the newest council members is so uninformed on the subject of Scientology that she thinks the problem is that we just haven't had enough communication with them. And I know I'm probably starting to repeat myself. The criticism is that if you think more communication is actually like the solution or the answer, then that means you're completely ignorant of the fact that this organization has an agenda that is completely contrary to the agenda of the city of Clearwater. Once you understand the security issue, now you know why Miscavige and all of his people were totally against Clearwater Marine Aquarium moving its main base of operations to downtown Clearwater. There's only one reason they were against that. They considered it to be a huge security threat to the base. Once you understand the security issue, you will understand that no matter what Miscavige or his representatives say, they are not in favor of the Imagine Clearwater project. It's not because they hate music or parks or picnics or anything. It's because all of those people coming down to downtown Clearwater on a regular basis are seen as a security threat to the flag land base. When Miscavige or his representatives say, we're totally in favor of a vibrant downtown Clearwater, they're not technically lying. If there was some magical way for Miscavige to create a vibrant downtown Clearwater with businesses owned by Scientologists, then he would do it. But as the council members have seen, there aren't even enough Scientologists to keep Scientologist-owned businesses open in downtown Clearwater. Even eateries owned by Scientologists have gone out of business in downtown Clearwater. The places that succeed in downtown are the places that get patronized by the non-Scientologists. Mayor Hibbard said at a recent meeting that there's an older generation of people who hate and distrust Scientology so much, no matter what we do, we'll never be able to bring them back downtown. But for everyone else, they'll pretty much come back downtown as long as there's something to come to. That is 100% correct. My point here is, Miscavige, can he say, I want a vibrant downtown Clearwater? We support those efforts? Yes, he can say it. It's technically true. He just doesn't want it to be accomplished with non-Scientologists. I hope everyone understands he's never going to admit that. Last thing I want to touch on, David Albritton made a comment about sort of being disappointed that every time it seems the city is making progress in its downtown sector, the Tampa Bay Times comes out and writes some sort of expose on Scientology, and Albritton characterized it as one step forward, two steps back. Well, here's my advice. Give the Tampa Bay Times a better story to write. Instead of making statements that once they are put into print, make you sound like some sort of an apologist or a coward, why don't you make statements that sound like you're putting your foot down and you're taking a stand? Why don't you say something like, we clearly cannot count on David Miscavige and the Church of Scientology to be a productive partner with the city of Clearwater because he won't even return our phone calls. Why don't you say something like, we really don't appreciate the lack of communication from David Miscavige? Why don't you say something like, the Church of Scientology claims that it wants to partner with the city of Clearwater, but their actions show that they have no interest in partnering with us at all. Maybe say something like, every time the Church of Scientology doesn't get what it wants, it throws the Urban Land Institute study in our faces and says that we don't care about it. And yet Miscavige just spent the last 2 years refusing to communicate with city leaders, initiating boycotts against non-Scientologist-owned businesses, and secretly buying all, if not more, of the available property in downtown Clearwater. Does that sound like David Miscavige is interested in partnering with the city of Clearwater? Look, I don't think you're an apologist for Miscavige, but you sound that way. When the Tampa Bay Times puts your words into writing, it inspires no confidence in anyone. And if you look at the comments on Facebook and YouTube, look, I put an entire hour of that council session on YouTube. 20,000 people have watched it, or at least 20,000 views. And all the comments are like, clearly these guys are in the pocket of Scientology. I know you're not, but you sound like you are. Give the Tampa Bay Times a better story to write than Mark Bunker asks for an investigation and nobody agrees. Say something strong enough that she can write a different story. Stop complaining that the newspaper keeps writing about the most important thing holding Clearwater back. You should be giving her something better to write about. I don't want to get off on too many tangents, and the more I talk about it, the more kind of upset I get about these things. Because to me, it seems like the solution to these things is simple. I feel like it's incumbent upon the city leaders to be as fully informed on the subject of Scientology as possible, and it just blows my mind, and it blows the mind of the people who've already seen the Leah Remini Scientology in the Aftermath show, and they've seen Glowing Clear, and they watch this YouTube channel. It really blows their mind that someone who's been elected to office in Clearwater can be so ignorant and naive on the subject of Scientology. And I didn't do this video just to like insult people and bash them over the heads. I don't want to get into doing that. I wanted to approach it from the viewpoint of, look, it seems like there's a lack of knowledge on behalf of the council on what really is motivating, what is behind the actions of David Miscavige and the Church of Scientology. I hope that filling in that vacuum a little bit arms you with some information that will be useful to you. I hope it allows some of the council members not to sound so naive and ignorant and act like, golly gee, if we just had better communication, everything would be fine. If only the people of the citizens of Clearwater were better informed, they wouldn't be so afraid. No one's afraid, you guys. The only one who sounds afraid are the city council members who seem terrified to say something that might hurt little David Miscavige's feelings. All right, well, I'm going to cut it off there because I'm going to try to edit this down to hopefully no more than 15 minutes. I would like to say, I think it's pretty cool that the last video I put up contained an entire hour edited down for time, an entire hour of a city council work session, and it has about 20,000 views right now. I think it's pretty cool that a Clearwater city council work session has 20,000 views. And like it or not, with Mark Bunker on the council and with Scientology in the spotlight here, there's going to be a lot of attention on how Scientology and the subject of Scientology is addressed at these city council work sessions and meetings for the next couple years. And I think that's a great thing. That's why I wanted to arm the council members with some information, understanding the security thing, because you guys don't want to look weak and uninformed. Nobody wants to look weak and uninformed. The solution is don't be weak and uninformed, and I hope this helps move it in that direction. Thank you to everyone who has watched this whole video. If you live in Clearwater, please share this video with a few other people who live in Clearwater. If you're watching this video and you don't live in Clearwater, but you know some people who do, please share this video with them. We want as many voting residents in Clearwater as possible to be paying attention to what's happening on the city council. We want people to be as informed as possible on how this Scientology issue is going to be dealt with. Because here's the thing, it's not just about hitting on Scientology or not hitting on Scientology. This Scientology issue and how it's being dealt with, how it is going to be dealt with, has everything to do with the future success of downtown Clearwater and the success of the Imagine Clearwater project. Again, Mayor Frank Hibbard made the point. People will come back to downtown if we give them something to come back to. That is the essence of the Imagine Clearwater project. I could not agree with him more. In order for that vision to become a reality, we need people to be informed and understand what the city is trying to do and why Scientology is trying to block it. Please share this video with as many people as you can in Clearwater and tell them to register to vote and to vote. All right, thanks everybody. Talk to you later. Bye.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not,